Hello, my name is Mauro Lepore and I work on this project with Aaron O'Day at the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute in Panama. We entitled this project Pristine Reef, Wanted Dead or Alive. First of all, I'd like to let you know that this link shown on screen, bookdown.org/maurolepore/sfs, will take you to the slides. Mounting evidence shows that the impact of humans on the natural world has been so great so far that it is really very difficult to find any place on Earth that could be considered, strictly speaking, truly pristine. Well, that is probably true, strictly speaking, but it is not very helpful, right? Because what do we scientists do with that? And it can also be dangerous because it can lead to thinking that there is nothing that we could do to make things better and it's not worthwhile doing. Instead, we propose to shift the focus from problems to solutions. What we need first is a new definition of pristine. In particular, I focus on coral reef ecosystems, so today we're going to talk about a new definition of what a pristine reef is based on data. Coral reefs in the Caribbean are severely degraded. We know that thanks to evidence that has been collected over the past at least 40 years and has been summarized by Jackson and colleagues. The causes of decline, well, it's mainly overfishing and disease, which resulted in that we have less herbivore fish and less herbivore sea urchins, and that of course tips the balance between algae and corals in coral reefs, making that algae bloom and corals die. But despite the general pattern of coral reefs decline, there may be exceptions. For example, Sinner and colleagues last year in 2016 published a paper in Nature showing that given some environmental conditions and human pressures, there are some reefs that are much better than you would expect. So the goal of, or the research question of our project was, what is pristine? And once we have a definition for pristine reefs, then we'd like to evaluate the current status of coral reefs. So we addressed this research question by doing three things. First, we defined pristine reef with historical data. Then we tested, using that definition, if the general pattern that we see in modern reefs confirms the general trend that we can see elsewhere. And finally, if there is any exception to the general pattern, then we would like to reveal it. So, to define pristine, we worked with a very simple general framework. It's called the natural range of variation. Basically, the idea is to define what a pristine condition is based on data that we collected in times when human impacts were not significant in coral reefs. So with that data, then we define a space, an ecological space, and we can evaluate if our current ecosystems fit within or outside that natural range of variation. So if it fits within, then we can say that the current condition is pristine under our definition, and if it doesn't fit within but falls outside the natural range, then it is degraded. The way we did that is by collecting samples in Isla Colón, in Bocas del Toro, Caribbean, Panama. We collected 16 communities from 4 different sites in mid-Holocene Reef, a reef that is about 7,000 years old. And we did a collection of 22 communities from 5 sites from sub-recent reefs. What is a sub-recent reef? Well, it's not simply a snapshot of what coral reefs are today. It is not data from living corals. Instead, what we did is we collected rubble, coral rubble that is sitting right next to the living colonies, and that has been accumulated over the past probably several decades and represent a time-averaged community that also represents more accurately the dynamics of long-lived organisms such as corals, right, that face storms, bleaching, die-offs due to fresh water, and so on. So this is our definition of a pristine reef. This figure shows 16 red points that represent each is one community from our mid-Holocene reef. How we came out with these points? Well, once we collected the rubble, we cleaned our samples to keep only corals. We identified each coral in each sample, and we weighted it. Each coral taxa then is made, or the weight of each coral taxa is then made relative to the weight of any other taxa in the same sample. So we calculate a relative abundance of each taxa in each community. Here we have 16 communities, so we have 16 in mid-Holocene reef, so we have 16 red points. So that is a multivariate data set that we get, where each variable is each of the taxa for which we have relative abundance, right? So it is really a multidimensional space, but here I'm summarizing that space in only 2 dimensions to create this figure, this plot, so we can digest that information. So this is really a summary of what the ecological space of pristine communities is, yet it is very insightful. So this is then our reference for evaluating what is the ecological space of subrecent samples, and this is what I'm going to show you next. When we plotted on the same graph subrecent communities, we can see that they plot on the left-hand side of the figure. This shows that subrecent reefs, on average, are similar to each other, or more similar to each other than they are to the average mid-Holocene reef, to the average pristine reef. And the opposite is also true. So each of the mid-Holocene communities, on average, is more similar to other pristine communities than they are to subrecent communities, which of course confirms the general pattern of decline that the more recent data has been showing. So this is cool, right? It's very good evidence, but it is something that it's not very novel. We already knew. What is novel instead is this other finding of one subrecent reef, that it is not plotting on the subrecent side of the plot. Instead, it is plotting on the pristine side of the plot. This shows that this reef called Punta Caracol fits within our definition of pristine. When we correlated the abundance of each coral taxa with where on the ecological space each community plots, we realized, or we learned, that Acropora cervicornis, which is one particular type of coral, one particular taxa, is the main driver of, or is the main variable that drags communities from Punta Caracol towards the mid-Holocene side of the plot. So the immediate question is that taxa the only one, the only difference that makes those communities better than the other subrecent communities, or more close to pristine? Well, the answer is no. When we removed our Acropora cervicornis from the data set and we recalculated or retested the differences between communities from Punta Caracol and other subrecent communities remain. So the difference is still there even when we remove Acropora cervicornis. So even if Acropora cervicornis gone, say that Acropora cervicornis, which is declining steeply in the Caribbean, say that if it completely goes extinct, it is possible that still these communities will be much closer to mid-Holocene communities, much closer to pristine than they are to other subrecent communities. So there we have our definition of pristine. Now we have someone to put here on this photo. right? And that was the first step that we were interested in doing. So our conclusion is that then Punta Caracol is an exception to the regional pattern of coral reefs decline in Bocas del Toro, right? Punta Caracol then fits within the natural range of variation, and the other subrecent reefs do not. They fall outside the natural range of variation. So they are, under our definition, degraded. This study then shows how to pragmatically evaluate human impact on coral reefs. And this sets also the road for identifying bright spots in the future, which, of course, what we want really is to learn why they are possible. Thank you very much. Email me if you have questions, maurolepore@gmail.com, or visit our website at odlab.com. And I would like to thank everyone listed here. John Pandolfi provided good ideas that originated this study. Andrew Altieri was very helpful at the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute in providing ideas too. The short-term fellowship program, donors, and in particular all the group of the ODA Lab, and these two women here on the far right, Melissa Chan, and next to her, Nicteja Munoz. Both of them were extremely helpful in collecting the data that I have shown today. Thanks.